Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome back to the channel for finally another Formula One race. This is only the second race we've had, I think, in the last 2 months. It's been quite sparse in terms of Formula One action in the last few weeks, but yeah, we are here in Montreal, in Canada, for the fifth race of the 2026 Formula One season. And obviously back live on the channel for the first time in 3 weeks since qualifying day in Miami. And thankfully, we are here in Canada because if you look at the calendar, really from now until the summer break, it really will start to get going this Formula One season in the next few weeks, because no longer will we have 3 week or longer breaks between races. It'll only be 2 weeks at most between now and the start of August. But between now and the start of August, we've got this race and then 3 races next month and three, I'm pretty sure, in the month of July. Or 2 in July and then 1 in August, or very start of August. So yeah, Formula One should really from now on properly get going for 2026. And fingers crossed that this Grand Prix weekend in Montreal will be an exciting one. Normally, the Canadian Grand Prix is one of the most exciting, chaotic race weekends of a Formula One season. It's been like that ever since really this Grand Prix was on the calendar, or entered the calendar back in I think it was the mid 1980s when this race was, I think, when this race was regularly put on the calendar. Obviously, this track was on the calendar back in the, I think, late 70s, but I'm not sure it was permanent every year at this circuit. I can't quite remember. But like I said, usually when it comes to chaos and massive excitement and classic races and just memorable moments in general, a lot of them take place at this circuit, the Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal. And looking at the field and the pecking order and the gaps through the field, it looks like we are in for an exciting weekend, whether it is dry or wet, because of course there is a big threat of rain for tomorrow's race. I know some of you may have some PTSD when you hear that regarding the last race in Miami, where there was supposed to be rain and it never came. But even if it's a dry race, I think we're in for an exciting weekend of action because of how close the field is. And we've already had plenty of excitement from the running so far. Obviously, this has been a sprint weekend as well. The sprint race finished a couple hours ago, I think it was. And I will touch on the results of that sprint race and what happened in a moment. And we'll also go through what the championship standings now look like going into this qualifying session. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this weekend. I think we're going to have an exciting weekend. Qualifying usually is good, and like I said, the race is usually a pretty exciting one. So yeah, very much looking forward to it here in Montreal. Hope you guys are well. Of course, there's not been any content on the channel the last 3 weeks. Apologies for that, but I've been very busy when it comes to work. So yeah, there's nothing I could do about that. And obviously, because there's not been a Grand Prix in the last 3 weeks, that's why it's been quite quiet, let's say. I will give you, though, a channel update later on in this stream, because I am pleased to announce that there will be a bit of an acceleration on the content front moving forward. But yeah, hope you are all well. Obviously, it's a May bank holiday weekend here in the UK, very hot one for us Brits. So yeah, if you're in the UK or anywhere in the world, hope you're all doing well, and no matter what part of the world you're in, time zone you're in, I hope you're all having as best time as possible given whatever circumstances you're going through. And I hope that you can join me this evening, this afternoon, this morning, again, wherever you are, in watching along and enjoying qualifying in Canada. Of course, if you can't watch the session but you want to keep up to date with what's going on, then this is the best place to be, as I'll keep you absolutely bang up to date with everything going on in the session. And as usual, we'll go through what's happened so far this weekend. Like I said, we'll touch on the sprint race result and a bit of controversy coming out of the sprint race in a moment. But in terms of building up to qualifying, we will look at the sprint qualifying data from yesterday, which gives us a really good indication as to the expected pecking order and what the pace of certain teams is probably going to be in this session. So we'll have a look through that, the sector time data, all of that stuff. And then I'll obviously go through what I think will happen with my own predictions. Let me know, of course, in the chat what you think's going to happen in qualifying today. And of course, there is a poll running in the chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix? Will it be the championship leader, Kimi Antonelli? Will it be his teammate, George Russell? Or will it be one of the Ferrari drivers, Lewis Hamilton or Charles Leclerc? Out of those four options, who do you think takes pole? If you don't think it's any of the four and you think it's Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, or Oscar Piastri to take pole, then make sure to post that comment in the chat and I'll make sure to read it out as I go along in this stream. But great to see you all after, a few weeks away. But let's touch on the sprint race. So George Russell won the sprint, starting from pole. He, in the end, didn't lose the lead at all. In terms of laps led, he did lose the lead briefly a couple times to his teammate, as the two Mercedes drivers clashed on track a couple times. And because of that, Lando Norris finished in second with Antonelli, the championship leader, in third. Oscar Piastri, late on, finished in fourth, with Charles Leclerc in fifth. Lewis Hamilton had a good race up until he hit the champion's wall at the exit of the final chicane, the Wall of Champions, as it's more famously known as. He hit the Wall of Champions a bit too hard, and I think that's what cost Hamilton a couple positions at the end, because I think his car was a bit damaged from that. So, Piastri finished in fourth, Leclerc fifth, Hamilton sixth, Max Verstappen a distant seventh, and then Arvid Lindblad finishing in eighth place. Good result for him and Racing Bulls. But the main point of contention from the sprint is what happened between the two Mercedes drivers. Antonelli was clearly quicker than Russell in that sprint. Tried to overtake around the outside at turn one. Had his car at least fully alongside, if not slightly ahead, into the apex of turn one. And then Russell, as far as I'm concerned, pushes Antonelli off the circuit. Russell has since, after the race, come out and said, "Oh, you can't overtake around the outside at turn one." Yes, you can. I mean, you can, as long as the person on the inside doesn't decide to push you off the circuit, which is what Russell did. So, clearly for me, George Russell in the wrong there, and Antonelli furious after the sprint race, and rightly so, because Russell very clearly pushed him off the track. And if Antonelli had been pushed off by any driver who was racing for another team in that situation, Mercedes would have gone mental. Absolutely no doubt about it. But because it was Russell and it's his teammate, they're trying to play it cool. But, I mean, surely Mercedes will look at that and say, George, you definitely pushed Kimi off the circuit. It's just so obvious that is what happened in that incident. Kimi furious, and we'll see whether this spills over into tomorrow in terms of any wheel-to-wheel battles between the two. But, that was the point of contention and the real controversy of the sprint. Good to see a bit of bite between the two Mercedes drivers. That's what really what we want to see. If the championship is ultimately going to be contested by only the two Mercedes drivers, we want to see, some Hamilton Rosberg-esque type of stuff, which that definitely was earlier in the sprint. So good to see for our benefit, and hopefully the gloves are now off, and Antonelli will now, will now treat Russell as if he's any other opponent rather than just, his teammate. But we'll see how that fares, that relationship and all going forward, in terms of when their next wheel-to-wheel battle is going to be. Maybe it'll be tomorrow, might not be until Silverstone or sometime like that. So who knows at the end of the day. But as far as I'm concerned, George Russell was clearly at fault for that incident. And if Antonelli, when he went off at turn 1, or not turn 1, turn 2, if Antonelli had gone off and it had resulted in him colliding with Russell, for me, Russell definitely would have been to blame for that incident, because Antonelli was going to make the corner until Russell decided to barge over and barge Kimi off the circuit. So, pretty clear case of pushing another driver off, as far as I'm concerned. But those are the results from the sprint. So let's see how that now affects the championship standings. So Kimi Antonelli, still the leader, and still the leader by 18 points. So I hope, from Kimi's perspective, that he doesn't get too caught up in what happened, because he is still in a relatively comfortable position regarding the lead of the championship. 18 points is a healthy lead. As long as he, finishes the race tomorrow, at least on the podium, he's still going to come away from this Grand Prix as the championship leader. So it's not, it's not anything to go absolutely crazy about at this point of the season. He just needs to reset and make sure that he gets ahead of Russell in qualifying and then stays ahead on the first lap. And then at that point, I think Antonelli is more so the favourite to win for Mercedes, given that he looked clearly quicker in the sprint than Russell did over the course of those, 23 laps. So, still a relatively comfortable lead for Antonelli. Like I said, 18 points. Russell in second, Leclerc third. Leclerc has not had a good weekend so far, but at least he does grab a few points. But he is now 43 points off the lead of the championship. He needs really a podium, I think, this weekend, Leclerc, if he's going to keep his championship hopes alive. Lando Norris, a bit closer to Leclerc. Norris only 5 points behind now in fourth place. Lewis Hamilton in fifth. Piastri sixth. Pretty close between the two Ferrari and two McLaren drivers. Max in seventh. A bit distant, but not too far away. He's only 20 points behind Piastri, which is not that much. And then Oliver Behrman in 8th, Pierre Gasly in 9th, and Liam Lawson in P10. Lawson, keep an eye out for him, because the Racing Bulls car looking quick. And Lawson, he wasn't able to do sprint qualifying for some sort of problem with the car. So, yeah, Lawson, when everything's normal, should be able to be probably up in the top 10 and maybe grabbing a point or two, so he might be able to keep his position in the top 10 of the championship when we get done with this weekend. On the constructor side, Mercedes pretty comfortable in the lead ahead of Ferrari. Ferrari, though, under some pressure now for second. They're only 11 points clear of the World Constructors Champions McLaren, who have been gaining a lot of points in the last, couple races or so. And obviously a couple sprint races we've had, they've been very good in those sessions. Then a big gap down to Red Bull in fourth, who are only 9 points clear of Alpine. Haas in sixth. Racing Bulls a point closer, but still seventh. And then a bit of a drop-off of 10 points to Williams in eighth. Audi in ninth. Cadillac 10th and Aston Martin 11th. By the way, shout out Cadillac, Sergio Perez finished 11th in the sprint race. It was helped by a few cars starting a bit lower down the order than normal, but that's a great result. 11th in the sprint. That's what, bang on halfway in the field. So Cadillac getting better all the time. No doubt about it. But those are the championship standings now coming out of the sprint race. Let's get on to sprint qualifying, which of course took place yesterday. And this data will give us a very good idea of what probably should happen in qualifying in just over an hour's time. So Mercedes, they locked out the front row and were 3/10 ahead of McLaren and Ferrari. Mercedes, in qualifying trim, they do have about a quarter of a second in their pocket over McLaren and Ferrari. So as long as the drivers deliver, Russell and Antonelli, as long as they deliver in qualifying, they should be on the front row. McLaren and Ferrari, unless one of their drivers does an absolute stonker of a lap, then I just don't see how Mercedes can't get the front row with both drivers. In terms of who gets pole, though, it is going to be very close between Russell and Antonelli. Russell, of course, took pole and won this Grand Prix last year, took pole in 2024. This is one of George Russell's best tracks. And for Russell, this is a critical weekend for his season and possibly his Formula One career, because he has got to put a stop to the momentum of his teammate. So getting pole for this Canadian Grand Prix really could, if it leads to a race win tomorrow, it really could be the turning point for him this season that he needs if he's going to be the world champion. So a massive qualifying session for George Russell, and we'll see how he gets on compared to Antonelli, who was only just over half a tenth slower than his teammate in the end. And then, so close between the two McLarens and the two Ferraris, only 0.13 of a second covering McLaren and Ferrari. Ferrari, though, I don't think delivered the best lap they could have done in sprint qualifying. Because if you go and look back at the session, Ferrari were pretty clearly quicker than the McLaren in the first couple parts of sprint qualifying. So I do feel as though, let's say every team does their best potential lap, I do feel like Ferrari really should be the second best team in qualifying. I did see a bit of data online that if everyone from sprint qualifying did their optimal lap, which is combining all three of their best sectors, Ferrari would have been, second best team and only 0.2 of a second away from pole. So there is another 1/10.5 on the table for Ferrari to find compared to what they did in this sprint qualifying session. So, Ferrari, kind of like what we saw in Miami, they're in a decent qualifying position, but still could be better. But the battle between McLaren and Ferrari, very close, and it's going to be exciting to see who ends up where. And then, Max Verstappen, 7th, doing the best he can, really. I know Isaac Hadjar was only 1/10 of a second behind. Shame for Hadjar, by the way, him having his engine problem in the sprint, because he was going to finish in that final points position if it wasn't for that. But Red Bull, pretty clearly the fourth best team. Doesn't mean Max can't do, well to a degree this weekend. I still think, if we do get some wet weather tomorrow, I don't see why Max can't still get a good result. But in dry conditions, Red Bull are pretty clearly the fourth quickest team and are lacking, I'd say, a couple tenths a lap to McLaren and Ferrari and about half a second per lap to the Mercedes team. So, Red Bull still much better than they were before. I think, that's one thing we need to at least praise them for. They have improved a lot, but they are still not quite where they need to be if they're going to be properly in the hunt for a strong podium finish or even contending for a race win in normal dry conditions. They are, if let's say that Red Bull was 2/10, maybe 3/10 quicker this weekend, then I think Max could legitimately fight for the win, given how great he is. But they're just lacking that extra, like I said, 2, maybe 3/10 of a second to properly get in that fight for the win. So, yeah. But again, in wet weather conditions, if we do get those tomorrow, which is looking... I'll be careful how I say this. It's looking very possible, but I wouldn't say likely because of what we saw in Miami. Yeah, we know how great Max is. So in the wet, you never know what he can do. But like I said, normal dry conditions, they still need another 2 to 3/10 if they're going to properly be in the fight. But at least they're close enough to where if chaos goes on ahead, they can still pick up some good points. And then Arvid Lindblad in ninth and only 3/4 of a second off pole. Very good lap and very good pace from Racing Bulls. Not entirely unexpected because, as we saw at the first Grand Prix of the season, because of how strong the Red Bull powertrain engine is, the Racing Bulls car is going to be stronger this season at more power-dominant circuits like this one. So, yeah, Racing Bulls, not surprised they're having a good weekend. The only thing is that maybe is a bit surprising is just how strong they look compared to a lot of the other midfield teams. So, yeah, good to see from Lindblad. And then Carlos Sainz, miraculously ending up in the top 10. A super, super job by Sainz, who's having a really great season in that car to get himself into the top 10. And then I'll just read out the rest of the order. 11th and 12th was the two Audis, just missing out on SQ3. And then Colapinto 13th, Gasly, and ended up being screwed over a bit by a yellow flag at the end of SQ1 for Fernando Alonso. So Alpine have got a lot more pace in the bag than what was actually shown in sprint qualifying. We saw a bit of that in the sprint race, actually. The pace that they probably will have. And then you got the two Haases, 14th and 15th. Haas, very disappointing this weekend. Alonso, 16th. Alonso doing a good job to get that high up, but he ended up still crashing out in qualifying. And then Sergio Perez, 17th. Lance Stroll, 18th. Gasly, then in 19th. Bottas in 20th. And then, Albon crashed because he collided with some local wildlife, let's just put it that way. And Liam Lawson had a problem with the car that the FIA detected when they inspected his car. So that's why only 20 cars did sprint qualifying. But in terms of the pecking order up front, it is, 2 by 2 for the front four teams, but it is not quite as simple as that. And let's get into why. So let's go through the sector time data. So the first sector is really where, if you've got, really good downforce and then just a great car through the corners, it's going to show in this first sector. And no surprise, the Ferrari is not just the fastest, by far the fastest team in this first sector. A 10th quicker than the Mercedes, 2/10 quicker than the Red Bull and the McLaren. This is just further evidence as to what we already know. The Ferrari, through the corners, is the best car. They just, again, still don't have the power to compete for race wins at a circuit like this. And that's what's really costing them. But this is just further good omens, I think, for the next Grand Prix on the calendar in Monaco in 2 weeks. Because if they can keep up this level of performance through those types of corners you've got in the first sector in Montreal, which you do have similar type corners in Monaco, slow, medium speed corners. Yeah, Ferrari looking, I think, very good to probably dominate the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, certainly if it's dry. And then, yeah, Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren pretty much on similar-ish pace, only half a tenth separating those three teams. Then a bit of a drop-off to Racing Bulls, looking good. Nearly 2/10 quicker than Haas. Haas looked good in the first sector, but as you'll see in a moment, they really just drop off the pace a lot in the middle and final sector. I don't know if that's similar reason to Ferrari that, they've got a good car through the corners, but down the straights, they're just losing too much performance. Obviously, they are powered by Ferrari as well. It is possible. Then you've got Alpine and Williams and Audi all on similar pace. Aston Martin only a 10th behind Audi through the first sector, and then Cadillac a couple tenths back. But yeah, Ferrari in the first sector, they have clearly the strongest car. And then you've got the middle sector, which is some, I'd say, medium speed, or a couple slow corners, couple medium speed corners, and then two longish straights. And that's really, from the middle sector onwards, is where the Mercedes-powered teams get a bit stronger as the lap goes on. As you can see, the two Mercedes-powered teams at the top. Mercedes half a tenth quicker than McLaren, and Ferrari a tenth and a half slower than Mercedes. So basically, all of the advantage that Ferrari gain on Mercedes in the first sector is basically all given away by the end of the middle sector. And that is almost entirely because they don't have as much power as the Mercedes powered teams do. That's what it comes down to. Red Bull, though, I do think have got a bit more performance to show in this part of the lap. 3/10 off the pace, but that's with Isaac Hadjar. We know, of course, Max should be the quickest Red Bull driver through this part of the lap. So I think Red Bull, watch out for them in the middle sector. I think they've got a bit more to show, maybe a couple more tenths at most in the car in this part of the lap. Racing Bulls, though, very quick in the middle sector and pretty much 3/10 quicker than the next midfield team being Williams. A big drop-off between those two teams. And then between Williams, Audi, Alpine, Haas, as you can see, it's very close. Only a tenth of a second separating those teams. But again, look at Haas. 9th best team in the middle sector when they were one of the best midfield teams in the first sector. So maybe it is power related. But yeah, as the lap goes on, that Haas car just doesn't really compete with the other midfield teams that have got the superior power units, being, the Audi, the Mercedes powered cars, the Red Bull powertrain, and the Racing Bulls as well. And then you got Aston Martin and Cadillac, two slowest teams as usual. And then the final sector is the best sector, without doubt, for illustrating straight line speed, because you've got the hairpin, slow corner, and then on the release from the hairpin, you are absolutely flat out for a good, 15 seconds? I think almost, until the final chicane, which is pretty quick in qualifying trim. And then you go through that, and then another quick acceleration zone, flat out to the line to finish your lap. And Mercedes, 2/10 of a second quicker than Ferrari. And this final sector, that's why Mercedes have that 2/10 of a second advantage over the next couple teams, being Ferrari and McLaren. And again, at more power dominant circuits, this is what you are going to see from Mercedes, because they, not only are they the works team, but I think they've really built their car around optimizing the power unit. When McLaren, I think, are a bit more focused on making their car a bit more aero reliant and really working on that. When, again, the Mercedes, I think the design philosophy, I think, again, it's more so focused on just not exemplifying what I'm trying to say, on getting the best out of their strongest area, which is, again, the power unit. So that's the difference between Mercedes and McLaren. And that's why Mercedes, at least in qualifying trim, they are, again, that 2 to 3 tenths of a second ahead because of the power unit. The car through the corners is still good, but is it the best car through the corners? No. It's I'd say the Ferrari rather than the Mercedes. But this circuit mostly flat out, and power is the most important thing around this particular circuit. Racing Bulls, as you can see, once again pretty quick through the final sector, which is a big reason why they're so quick this weekend. One thing I will say is Red Bull, I do think, can be a bit quicker in this final sector by at least a tenth, maybe a tenth and a half, given how strong their power unit is, and their biggest strength, without doubt, is straight line speed. I do think that, Red Bull haven't quite optimized their pace through the final sector. So for Red Bull, I think there is more time on the table to find. Whether they can find it or not, we'll have to see. With Max Verstappen, anything is possible. And then a bit of a drop-off from Racing Bulls down to Williams and Audi, pretty close on performance. Then a bit of a drop-off to Alpine. And then a tenth of a second drop-off to Haas, again, very slow. And then Aston Martin and Cadillac on similar pace. One thing I wanted to say, though, another thing, rather, I wanted to say regarding this data is with Alpine, keep an eye out for them, because this data from them in sprint qualifying is from Colapinto, who we know, despite what happened in the last Grand Prix, Colapinto is normally the slower of the two Alpine drivers. So if we go back to this first sector, if Gasly can be at his best in this session, then I don't see why Alpine can't be, say, 6th best in the first sector, and then probably 6th best in the middle sector, and then in the final sector be, say, a bit closer to Audi and Williams. So Alpine, I think Alpine have got top 10 pace with Pierre Gasly, but whether Gasly can show that, we'll have to see. From what I remember, historically speaking, I don't think Pierre Gasly's had that many good Canadian Grand Prix. So we'll have to see whether he actually does show up this weekend. He didn't quite show up in Miami when his teammate Colapinto did, for once, which was good to see. But that Alpine car has not quite shown how good it really can be so far. So keep your eye out on Alpine. They've got a lot more pace. But let's go back to this top 10 from sprint qualifying. So in qualifying trim, Mercedes, like I've said, 2 to 3 tenths quicker than the rest of the field. Second best team, I think purely because they've got the Mercedes power unit, is probably McLaren, but I do think Ferrari are close enough. And with the drivers they've got, have got a good enough chance to be ahead of McLaren on the grid. It's close enough for that to happen. So, McLaren probably just about quicker, but not quick enough to the point where they can definitely out-qualify Ferrari. So those are clearly, second and third fastest teams. Red Bull, pretty clearly the fourth fastest team. But I do think Max can get in to that Ferrari-McLaren fight a bit. So do watch out for him, because as I said, I think there is more pace in that Red Bull. And then after that, Racing Bulls, I think pretty clearly you'd have to say fifth fastest team. After that, though, Alpine, I think, will be I think definitely ahead of the rest of the midfield, but I think they really could be right there, if not quicker than Racing Bulls. Because if you go and actually look at the data from the sprint race, Alpine were actually faster than Racing Bulls over the course of the sprint race. But because Alpine had a much worse track position, that's why Lindblad beat Colapinto to 8th place, which was the final points-paying position for the sprint. So, yeah. Alpine and Racing Bulls, I think, will be pretty close with each other. So, those are the 5th and 6th best teams. 7th best, I'd say probably Audi, just ahead of Williams. I think it's very close, though, between those two. So those are 7th and 8th best teams. 9th best team, you'd have to say Haas. I think that's what the problem is at the end of the day. I just don't think they have enough power to be really high up there in qualifying. I do think, though, they will have a strong race. So watch out for them in the race tomorrow. And then Aston Martin, in qualifying yesterday, they were clearly quicker than Cadillac, but Cadillac were then pretty comfortably quicker than them in the sprint. So as to who will be quicker out of those two teams in qualifying, I'm not sure. Probably Aston Martin, because they've got Alonso in their car. But I'm not sure that's necessarily down to, again, Aston Martin having the faster car. So we'll see who ends up quicker, but both Aston Martins and both Cadillacs really should be eliminated in Q1. So, yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But the field, overall, looking pretty close and competitive. Not quite as close and competitive as it was in Miami, but still close enough to where I think we're going to have a good, exciting weekend overall. And here are my predictions based off of all this data. So just about after the controversy earlier and after getting his head down, which I'm sure he will do for qualifying, Kimi Antonelli, I believe, will take pole position just about by about half a tenth ahead of his teammate George Russell. It's going to be a great fight between those two for pole. Lewis Hamilton, then, I'm going in third. Hamilton has been great this weekend. It really has looked like the Lewis of old, for much of this weekend. And I think he's been saying he feels a lot more comfortable in the car now that he's not in the simulator as much, which is good to see. And yeah, I think he will deliver a bit more of what the potential is, and I think he will just edge himself ahead of the two McLarens. And that, if he can do that, be vital for his race, because I do think Ferrari have got a chance of winning the race tomorrow. Not saying they will win, but it's definitely not impossible, especially if the rain comes down, which will really neutralize any power differences between the teams. That's going to help Ferrari, or at least it should. So yeah, I think Hamilton will just nip himself ahead. 4th, Lando Norris. 5th, I'm going to go Charles Leclerc. 6th, Max Verstappen, just ahead of Oscar Piastri. Might be a bit of a surprise to some of you who've gone with Piastri down as 7th, but it is so close between those group of drivers, Hamilton, Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen, Piastri, as it was in sprint qualifying. I think you could predict any of those 5 drivers in whatever order in that part of the grid, and you would be having a decent chance of being correct, put it that way. So, yeah, I think it's close enough to where that prediction I've gone for is definitely possible. Is, 2/10 at most probably is going to separate 3rd from 7th, or even 3rd from 8th. It is going to be very, very close in qualifying today. And then in 8th place, I'm going Pierre Gasly. I think he will step up in this qualifying session and show the true pace of the Alpine and nip himself in front of the Red Bull of Isaac Hadjar, who will be in 9th. And then Arvid Lindblad, I'm going to go in P10. So that's my qualifying prediction, guys. Let me know in the live chat whether you agree or disagree. And of course, there is a poll running in the chat where you can let me know, out of the 4 options I've nominated, who do you think will take pole position? Will it be Antonelli, Russell, Hamilton, or Leclerc? I think it'll be Antonelli. Let me know if you agree or disagree. But let me just come back here and I'll just get the timer back on the screen, as we've got just over 45 minutes to go until qualifying gets underway. There you go, 49 minutes exactly until qualifying is underway. And yeah, make sure if you are new to the channel to subscribe for more content like this, as we do plenty of watch-alongs through the season and, in-season content, videos, all of that sort of stuff. So make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Make sure as well to smash a like button if you haven't already. Let's try and get the likes up as much as we can. And yeah, make sure to get your comments in the chat. And I'll try. And if you've got any questions or whatever, I'll try and get to some of them over the course of this build up to qualifying. But let me just have a quick sip of water before I go any further. And yeah, looking at the sky coverage at the minute, it is dry. I don't think there's any threat of rain for qualifying, even though it is cloudy. Yeah, I think I looked at the weather about an hour ago, and I don't think there was any threat of rain. But for tomorrow, it is looking pretty, again, possible that we'll get some rain. In terms of the forecast, it's looking similar to what we had a couple years ago in 2024, where it started off wet and then dried out. That's probably what will happen. And that race was a classic, a brilliant race. I loved that race. One of the best races I'd say we've had in the last 3 or 4 years. So if we can live up to that, then we are in for a treat this weekend. But yeah, I just wanted to before I read any comments out, I just wanted to go through a couple things. Firstly, rest in peace to the NASCAR legend himself, Kyle Busch. Very sad news of his passing. A couple days ago, I think this news was announced. I saw reports on X that he was battling a serious illness and he was in the hospital, and then suddenly 2 or 3 hours later it was announced that he'd passed away. It was very shocking. Yeah, obviously sending my thoughts and my love to all the people affected by the news. I don't watch NASCAR, but I know enough to know he was a legend in NASCAR, and he transcended the sport in terms of he was known outside of NASCAR, but just how great he was. So yeah, very sad. Actually, there was a reveal earlier today about what happened to him. He apparently was battling serious or a severe case of pneumonia, which turned into sepsis, which led to him passing away. It sounds simple, but it does happen. Plenty of people pass away from from having a severe case of pneumonia. Pneumonia, I've never had it, and God willing, I will never have to suffer that, because from what I've heard, it is absolutely horrific illness. So yeah, very sad. And like I said, thoughts with the loved ones and everyone affected by the news. And good to see Sky and F1 eventually paying tribute yesterday with their coverage. So yeah, good to see yeah, very sad news. That was a couple days ago. But the other thing I wanted to just quickly get into was just a quick channel update, because of course I haven't done any content for the last 3 weeks basically, because we haven't had a Grand Prix in 3 weeks. But also the last 3 weeks have been very busy with work. In terms of that work, it's easing up a bit for the next few weeks, so that's a good thing. But one thing I wanted to let you guys know is that, yeah, now that there's going to be more, say, races more frequently, there will be now a lot more content on the channel moving forward between now and the summer break. Not just me covering each, Grand Prix weekend, but also there will be videos in between the races. For example, I've got a video that will be coming out next week, probably Thursday or Friday next week, which is going to be actually a video about this whole Mercedes driver situation. I was planning it a few days ago about what the video is going to look like and all of that. And obviously this what happened in the sprint race earlier today just adds fuel to that fire. So yeah, that's going to be a video that will be coming out next week. And then maybe, if anything else, properly interesting comes out of this Canadian Grand Prix weekend, maybe I'll do another video as well. But yeah, now that we're properly into the Formula One season, now there's going to be no more long breaks between races until at least the summer break. Now, like I said, it will start to pick up on the channel. So obviously today or tonight I'm doing this stream. Tomorrow night, just to remind you, I will be live for the race, and I will be joined by Niblo, my co-commentator. He'll be joining us for the Canadian Grand Prix. I know he's pretty excited for this one. So yeah, he'll be joining us tomorrow night, and I'll be live as usual 2 hours before lights out at 7 p.m. UK time for the race. And then there'll be a podcast on Monday, a video then on Thursday or Friday next week going into this Mercedes driver situation regarding the championship. And then in 2 weeks from now, it's the Monaco Grand Prix, and I will be live at least for qualifying for Monaco. When it comes to the race, I'll only be live for the race if we're going to get some rain. So it's pretty likely I will not be live for the race itself. But point is from now on, for this next 8 to 10 weeks, there is going to be a lot more content on the channel now that we're done with all these, long ass breaks. So yeah, good news. And I'm excited to get, some of the videos out that I'll be getting out in the next few weeks, and hope you guys enjoy them. And hopefully these next few races coming up will be exciting and keep us entertained going forward. But let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Official J-Man, I think it is, says this F2 race is about to get good. That was a comment from a bit ago. Yeah, the F2 race took place, and I was watching it as I was talking through that data earlier, and yeah, typical F2. I think that's that's got to be really the headline from that sprint race, F2 sprint race, because yeah, some of the incidents were just so typical of that series. Dive bombs and tagging the rear end of other cars, and crashing into other cars. It's just typical F2. I've got to say, letting F2 drivers race around here it feels like an act of war, quite frankly, because I mean they're pretty terrible when it comes to driving standards at most racetracks. But given the chaos that normally happens here in F1 races, yeah, letting the F2 drivers race around here is pretty mental stuff. But yeah, we'll see if the driving standard level is a bit better in the feature race tomorrow. But typical F2, as I said, with what was going on earlier. Anyway, let me have a look, see what the comments we've got. By the way, hello to Rooks in the chat. Good to see you, mate, after a few weeks. And by the way, this in the chat saying, is this real F1 qualifying? Yes. Brabham saying Russell's going to get pole, one of the McLarens will split one of the Mercs, which is pretty much what happened in the sprint race. That would be great if that happened, but that feels like that would more likely happen in the race, because McLaren, as we saw in Miami, not super quick over a qualifying lap, but the race pace is definitely there. Again, we saw it in Miami, and we really saw it in the sprint race. I mean, Lando could have easily won that sprint if he had just got a bit of a better exit from certain corners. He could have had a proper go at overtaking Russell for the lead, but he just couldn't quite get close enough to properly have a go at him. But yeah, McLaren, the race pace is there. They have got, without doubt, a fast race car. It feels like with McLaren, the characteristics of their car are pretty similar to last year, where qualifying they were quick but not at their best, but the race day is really where they would shine in terms of car performance. So yeah, McLaren, I think as long as they can get at least one car in the top 3, I think they'll be happy with that, because they know then that they can then get after the Mercedes and give them a hard time tomorrow. And if it does rain, I think that probably plays into the hands of McLaren to a degree. So they've got 2, I'd say, good wet weather drivers. So, yeah. Watch out for McLaren in the race. They've been quite impressive in race conditions in the last, or ever since the Japanese Grand Prix, really. Serena, I think it is how's it going, fam? Yeah, I'm doing fine. I did have some good news a few days ago. I got my uni grades back for we've just completed a semester on my master's screenwriting course that I'm doing. We completed the semester about a month ago, or was it a month ago or 5 weeks ago, something like that. And I just got my grades back for it a few days ago, and yeah, really good grades. So fingers crossed I can keep it up at minimum, and hopefully maybe even improve. Looney Classic says McLaren is probably just one good upgrade from becoming the fastest car. I mean, every upgrade they bring at this point is a good upgrade. I mean, look at the Miami Grand Prix. That upgrade package there has really transformed their season. Now they can properly get into the fight with Mercedes, it feels like at this point. So yeah, the next upgrade package, let's say it comes at the British Grand Prix, you would imagine, given it's their home race. It might do. It might put them in the position to be the fastest team yet again. Without a doubt, at this point, McLaren are the best team on the grid at developing their car over the course of a season. They have took that title from Red Bull. At this point, they're just so good at it. Every time they bring a big upgrade, they improve by like a good chunk of time. So yeah, McLaren will see what they can do in a few races when presumably they'll bring their next big upgrade. In terms of upgrades, Mercedes, by the way, have brought an upgrade this weekend. Pretty big one. 8 different parts. New floor, new front wing. A lot of new parts. But it doesn't feel like Mercedes are really... I mean, they're quicker here than they were in Miami, but I think they were always going to be quicker here than they were in Miami anyway, because I think this track suits their car more than the Miami one. So, yeah, it doesn't really feel like they've improved that much, Mercedes, with their upgrade. McLaren, though, they brought a load of new parts as well, and it has certainly kept them in the game. Ferrari, though, the impressive thing with Ferrari is they haven't brought any upgrades at all this weekend. Literally not one. And they're only, 2-3 tenths off Mercedes in qualifying trim. So it just shows you with Ferrari that, they're also a team that if they can just get that one big upgrade that pushes them forward by a few tenths, they're right where they need to be. But I think at this point, there is no doubt, despite Mercedes having won all the races so far, Mercedes are not in as dominant of a position now as they were 2 months ago, where they were, locking out the front row and would be half a second or more ahead of the next best car. That is not happening anymore, at least for now. So the gap has been closed. There is no doubt about that. And we'll see what the others can do. The team that I'd say probably most excited about in terms of potential is still Red Bull, because the engine that Red Bull have got is good. It's a very good performing power unit. They just need some more performance upgrades on the chassis side. And, if they can close in another 2-3 tenths, then I think Max can start to work his magic. So I am still hopeful with Red Bull over what they could do with their car. But if you look at McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull, they've all got potential to close that gap and get into a position where they're winning races this season. So, again, Mercedes may have won all of the races so far this year, but they are by no means dominating, in terms of the distance they're winning by. They're still having to really work hard for their wins, as we saw in Miami, and as we'll probably see tomorrow if they do end up winning, which is still probably the most likely outcome. Yeah, Sarah Gara saying, yeah, Carl Busch had 2 NASCAR titles. Yeah, such a shame what happened to him. Mr. Landman says Max for pole. Max has had pole here 3 times before, so it's not impossible. Rook's saying both Mercs seem to have better starts in the sprint. Yeah, Mercedes have definitely improved their starts, no doubt. I think, though, it does help at this track that the run down to the first corner is pretty short. It's one of the shortest on the calendar. So that, like I said, is helping, but their starts are nowhere near as bad as they were back in, a couple months ago. I will get to more of your comments, by the way, in a moment, guys. Let me just post a link of the stream out, and then I'll get on to them. Come join us here to Watchalong qualifying in Canada. And there you go. Greetings. Thank you. Good to see you. How long till qualifying starts? If you look at the top right of my screen, you'll see we've got what, just under half an hour, so not long. This stream's absolutely flown by so far. Looney saying, hi Jazza, are you going to move to the USA to work in Hollywood after your studies? I wish, but well, to be honest, I don't think I would wish to live out there, given the current just situation in the world at the minute. But I mean, obviously that's the dream, isn't it? But I think the good thing about the screenwriting industry is you don't need to be in, you don't need to live in Hollywood or New York to get any work. It's become a proper international industry where, you could easily be very successful and work here in the UK in this industry. There's plenty of examples of that. So, if I ever get into a position like that, great. But personally, I'd prefer to stay here in the UK rather than move to really any country. And like I said, it's much more viable now doing that than 20 or 30 years ago. You would basically have to throw yourself out there to give yourself any sort of a chance, but not quite the case these days. But yeah, I'm enjoying the course, doing well, getting good grades. So yeah, we'll see what the future holds. Darbo says, sweet soz in Australia, no problem. Someone might says, California is beautiful, but Hollywood is trash. Exactly. If I ended up moving out there, I'd probably want to move to somewhere, quiet and scenic rather than be in the middle of it all. Because in terms of where I live and where I've grown up, I live out in the sticks. Like, I don't live in a city. City life is not for me. And this is just the way we are here in Cornwall. It's just that's the type of life we enjoy. I would much prefer to live out in the sticks than live in a city where there's plenty of people who would be terrified by that prospect, who have only lived in a city their whole life and would be terrified at having to live out in the sticks where, there's only like one bus an hour, or on certain days there's like one bus every 3 or 4 hours, or certain little places you can't even get public transport to or from. So yeah, that's the type of life I prefer, to be honest. But yeah, we'll see what the future holds. It's a 2-year course, the screenwriting course I'm doing, so I've got another. It finishes next August next year, so we'll see how I do, what grades I get, and then we'll see what happens after that. But yeah, hopefully an exciting future. Anyway, keep your comments coming and any questions you have or whatever. Before I go through any more comments, though, let's just do a quick roundup of the teams and where they should all be aiming for in qualifying. So Mercedes, of course, should be aiming for the front row. They've got enough of a buffer to the other teams to be locking out the front row. The main fight and the main focus, though, especially after that sprint race, is the fight between the two Mercedes teammates of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Who will win the battle? It's going to be very close. It's going to be hundredths, maybe even thousandths of a second. Remember a couple years ago between Russell and Verstappen, they did the exact same lap time. It has always been really close, the fight for pole position at this circuit, because of not only the shortness of the track, but it is just, the differences you can make around this circuit, it really is so small, compared to, say, other circuits. So it is really going to be an exciting fight when we get to Q3. And whoever wins the battle might end up winning the Grand Prix itself tomorrow. Of course, George Russell, he took pole at last year's Canadian Grand Prix and then went on to win. Can he do the same again? If he can, it would be a possible turning point for him in his season. But if Antonelli can get pole and deliver yet another win, which would be his 4th consecutive win, then he really could start to run away with this championship. So this is a crucial moment in the Drivers' Championship this weekend, no doubt about it. But in terms of who wins the fight for pole, I think it'll be Antonelli, but definitely I think they get the front row. Ferrari, they've got a quick qualifying car, not quick enough to fight Mercedes, but I think quick enough to beat McLaren. Whether they do beat McLaren, though, or not, it's going to come down to a lot of factors. One, how the McLaren drivers perform, obviously how the Ferrari drivers perform. But with Lewis Hamilton, he's had a great weekend so far. If he can keep that up, I don't see why he can't be 3rd on the grid. It is definitely possible. As you saw in sprint qualifying with the data we showed earlier, he was only, 300ths of a second away from 3rd on the grid? 300ths is a very small amount of time. So it is definitely possible. And if they want any chance to win tomorrow, then really I think they need to be in the top 3 of the grid. Because especially if it rains, which should theoretically bring Ferrari into play and give them a better chance of winning, they need to be there to really take on the Mercedes head on, rather than be engaged in fighting the McLarens and, getting caught up with that. So it is a crucial qualifying session for what could be, if the weather plays out how they want, it could be the first Grand Prix win of the season for them. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, 3rd on the grid, definitely possible, but it will be very close between them and McLaren. And don't count out Red Bull. I still think there's more potential there. I think Max can get into that fight with McLaren and Ferrari. I'm not saying he'll end up 3rd. If he did, that would be a fantastic, amazing, quite frankly, result. 3rd row of the grid, though, I think is possible. So do not count out Max Verstappen, who's always been super quick around this track. Isaac Hadjar hopefully will put behind the engine issue he had in the sprint behind him, and he will at least line up in 8th place, and hopefully then go on to get a few points tomorrow. But yeah, keep an eye out for Red Bull. Definitely not out of the fight. And then yeah, for McLaren, probably do have a slightly quicker car than Ferrari, but Ferrari superior drivers compared to McLaren. So yeah, that is possibly what could decide who ends up 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or even 7th if Max, gets involved as well. So the 2 drivers, like they were yesterday, have got to be absolutely at their best if they want to get in a good grid position. And if they want to win tomorrow and take what would be their first win in Canada in 14 years, they have got to be, I think, top 3 on the grid. I'm not saying they can't win from outside top 3 on the grid, but if they really want to, as I said with Ferrari, take on Mercedes, then they've got to be right there, right behind them, so they can get straight after them in the race itself. But it's going to be very close. Wouldn't be surprised if they ended up 3rd, given how quick that they've looked. But it is going to be very close between them, Ferrari, and Max Verstappen. Now into the midfield. Audi looking okay, I would say. I was hoping they'd be a tad quicker than they've shown this weekend. For them to have been out-qualified by the Williams of Sainz in sprint qualifying, I think will be very disappointing for them, given that they do have the better car. So I think there's more potential there, but I'm not sure that potential gets them in the top 10 because Alpine have not shown their full potential either. And Racing Bulls clearly look faster than them. So a pretty decent chance they'll end up outside the top 10 with both cars, but be, say, 11th and 12th, yet again, like they were in sprint qualifying. But I think for the race, even if they are 11th and 12th, that's still a decent track or grid position to have, because in the race, there will, I'm sure, be plenty of position changes, and I don't see why they can't have a good enough, say, race pace to go score points tomorrow. Haas, really the most disappointing team for me this weekend so far. I really thought they would have a pretty good go at being, say, close at least to the top 10 fighting for points. But yeah, they look nowhere, quite frankly, this weekend. Really disappointing. As long as they get both cars into Q2, then maybe they can do something tomorrow where surely they will be quicker in race conditions. Saying that, they weren't that quick in the sprint. They were actually slower than Cadillac in the sprint, so maybe there's no hope for this team. But yeah, very disappointing weekend so far. Hopefully they can pick it up somehow in qualifying. Racing Bulls, watch out for them. They are probably the surprise team of the weekend, even though they were always going to be a bit quicker at a circuit like this. Arvid Lindblad has had a great weekend. 9th in sprint qualifying, 8th in the sprint race, getting a point for himself and the team, which is great to see. And I don't see why he can't keep that up. Another reason why this is such an impressive performance, I don't believe Lindblad has raced here before. Maybe he has, but I don't believe he has. And even if he did last year, I don't think he has that much experience in general around this circuit. So yeah, very impressed with his performance this weekend. If you perform well around a track like this, you are going to really impress people. And yeah, good to see that he is on it after a couple not so great races that he's had as of late. But thankfully the car's there with him and he's delivering good pace. As I said earlier, Alpine have got a lot more in the bag that they've not shown. If Gasly can show it, then I think he'll be in the top 10 and have a strong result. Maybe even both Alpines can get in the top 10, because Colapinto had a pretty strong sprint race, so watch out for Alpine in general as a team. There is definitely more pace there, of course, with the Mercedes power unit in the bag. Mercedes power unit in the back for Williams as well. They were not that great, though, in the sprint. But, I mean, Carlos Sainz still did drag this car into the top 10 in sprint qualifying. Can he do it again? I'd be seriously impressed if he could. But as long as he drags it into Q2, I think that's at least good enough. Williams still have got problems. Aston Martin seem over a qualifying lap quicker than Cadillac, but Cadillac were then much quicker in the sprint. So I'm not quite sure what to say in regards to whether Aston Martin should be ahead of Cadillac. I mean, because this is a power track, Cadillac really should be ahead because they have the much superior power unit in the Ferrari power unit that Cadillac have compared to the Honda in the back of the Aston Martin. But with how well Alonso's driving, and Alonso is a demon around this track, he's always been so great here in Montreal, maybe that can drag the Aston Martin into a bit of a better position than it should be. So we'll see, but probably this team, Cadillac, will be just ahead of Aston Martin, like I said, for that power advantage. Very positive to see how quick they were in the sprint. Bit more of that, and they might be able to contend for a points finish if we get a bit of a wacky enough race in the, maybe tomorrow or just going forward in general, because they looked much quicker in that sprint than they've been really at any point this season. So keep your eye on Cadillac. But here is a reminder of my prediction for the top 10 in qualifying. I think it'll be Antonelli on pole, Russell second, Hamilton third, Norris fourth, Leclerc fifth, Max Verstappen in sixth, Piastri seventh, Gasly eighth, Hadjar ninth, and Arvid Lindblad in 10th. And we have got just under 15 minutes to go until qualifying is underway in Montreal. There you go, 14 minutes. And then we'll be underway for this session. Qualifying normally here, pretty exciting. It's never really, from what I can remember, been a simple procession type of session where you expect one driver to get pole and they do easily. Never really happens here in Canada. It's always pretty close, whether it's between teammates or different teams. So I'm expecting today to be no different, as Ted Kravitz showing work going on in the Ferrari pits, as I'm just watching the Sky F1 coverage, of course, as they're building up to qualifying as well. Paul James Squibbs, good to see you, mate, says village life is the best life, urban life is not healthy. Yeah, I much prefer, I mean, and I obviously am going to say this, given that I've always lived, again, more out in the sticks, but yeah, I just prefer it much more to city life. I mean, yeah, in certain cities, there's a lot more to do if you live in those type of areas compared to if you live out in the sticks, but it depends on where you grow up and what you naturally just prefer, and I just prefer to be surrounded by fields rather than people. That's just that's just what I prefer. Hello to Ewok as well. Good to see you in the chat. But yeah, we've got just over 10 more minutes to go until the session is underway. I'll have a quick sip of my drink again. As what do you call it? They're just working on Kimi Antonelli's car as he's put his arm around his engineer, Peter Bonington, in the Mercedes garage. He looks a lot happier now than he sounded on the radio about 3 hours ago at the end of the sprint race. But as I said a few minutes ago, this is not just this qualifying session, but this weekend in general is much more important for the championship than people realize, especially if the championship is only between the two Mercedes drivers, because Antonelli is on a roll, loads of momentum, his confidence is through the roof, and George Russell, who came into this season as the favourite, he was my favourite for the championship. I predicted him to win the championship in my season predictions that I did right before the first race in Australia. If he is going to be world champion this year, it really does feel like Russell has got to win this Grand Prix. Because if he doesn't, and Antonelli wins again and keeps this run going, you struggle really to see when the run will be broken, at least of Antonelli beating Russell, and where then Russell can mount a comeback. Because if Antonelli wins tomorrow and Russell finishes in second, then coming out of this race, Antonelli will be 25 points clear of George Russell. That's a full race win in points. He will be ahead of his teammate. So, you know, if he wants to keep it at least close at this point of the season, and again, get that momentum for Antonelli stopped and get it going his way again, he's got to win this Grand Prix. No matter, even if Antonelli finishes second, George Russell must be the victor of this Grand Prix, this Grand Prix weekend. Because if he's not, then I think Antonelli then becomes the clear favourite for the championship at that point. So we'll see what Russell can do. As we're just looking at Charles Leclerc there in the Ferrari garage. I gotta say, we haven't really talked about Leclerc, but Leclerc has not had a great weekend. I got to say though as well, Leclerc has never really been that great, has he, at this Montreal circuit? He's I think he did finish on the podium here in 2019, but he was a distant third to his teammate at the time, Sebastian Vettel, who finished second in that very controversial race back then. But other than that, he's never really done anything of note here in Montreal, so maybe this is just a bad circuit for him, but Leclerc really needs to step it up, because if he wants to keep close enough to the Mercedes drivers between now and the summer break to at least keep himself in the conversation for the championship, he's got to be, I think, on the podium this weekend. But looking at his pace compared to his teammate, it looks like he probably do well to finish in the top 5. Never mind in the top 3. So, yeah, big weekend for Leclerc as well. As Sky have gone to an ad break, and yeah, we've only got now a few more minutes until the session begins. And as well, a quick reminder that the poll in the chat is running, where I've asked you guys who do you think is going to take pole position, and the options in the poll are Antonelli, Russell, Hamilton, Leclerc. Let me know out of those 4 options who you think will take pole position. And as usual, I will keep that poll running until the start of Q3, which will be in about an hour from now. So just let me know between now and then, who do you think takes pole position? And then we'll see who you guys have voted for. And then shortly after that, we'll see who actually does take pole position. But let me just read out a couple final comments if I can find any. And then we'll get into the session. He walks as I prefer to live in a padded cell. Ezra saying Max Verstappen. I don't know if that's a prediction. Is there any other comments? Let me just scroll up a second. Nope, don't think there is. But of course, if anyone has any quick predictions they want to make for the top 3, top 5 for the session, get them in the chat and I'll read it out on stream. But yeah, very much looking forward to this session. And to be honest, I've been looking forward to this Grand Prix weekend for a few weeks because I had the feeling we'd have a close competitive weekend here, and it's looking to be the case. So, yeah, should be a good weekend of action here in Montreal. And thankfully, these cars not clipping as much with the power units as we saw before, so they're a lot more enjoyable to watch and a bit more enjoyable to drive for the drivers, which of course is good. Well, the F1 intro now begins, so let me just go through a final couple things before we get into the session, and of course, a reminder of the championship standings now that we are done with the sprint race in Canada, which finished about 3.5 hours ago. Kimi Antonelli comes into this qualifying session 18 points clear of George Russell. Charles Leclerc in third, 43 points behind Antonelli. Lando Norris closing in, though, on Leclerc. The battle for third heating up. So Norris in fourth. Hamilton only 9 points behind his teammate in fifth. Piastri then in sixth. 20 points back is Max Verstappen in seventh place. In eighth place, Oliver Behrman. Ninth is Pierre Gasly. And in 10th, Liam Lawson. On the constructors' side, Mercedes pretty comfortable in the lead. Ferrari in second, but now have a challenger to that second place. McLaren, after the sprint, are now only 11 points behind in third. Of course, McLaren are the constructors' champions for the last 2 years. Big drop-off then in points to Red Bull in fourth, who are only 9 points clear of Alpine in fifth. Haas in sixth. Racing Bulls a point closer in seventh. And then a 10-point drop-off to Williams in eighth. Audi 3 points behind in ninth. And still on 0 points, Cadillac and Aston Martin. And Q1 will be underway in about 3 minutes' time. Of course, be an 18-minute long session for Q1, and then 15 minutes for Q2, and 13 minutes for Q3. And in Q1, we knock out the 6 slowest drivers, whoever those are, after the 18 minutes are up. And just a reminder as well, when it comes to tyres, Pirelli have brought the 3 softest compounds for this Grand Prix. I mean, we've seen this season that these tyres don't wear out at all around any track. So Pirelli may as well just bring the 3 softest compounds at every track, because there is just no tyre wear with these Pirellis. But yeah, C5, C4 and C3 are your 3 compounds. And we'll be underway in the next couple minutes, and I will sync up the timer at the 17-minute mark when we do get underway. There's plenty of fans packed in the grandstands. All different types of fans. You got Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren hats, Max hats. All different fan bases represented in the grandstands. The Canadian fans are great. Always give a good support to all the drivers out there. But we've got plenty of cars parked up at the exit of the pit lane. As we enter the final minute before the session begins. As Lance Stroll, of course, home driver, is in that queue. But unfortunately for the home crowd, there'll be nothing really to cheer when it comes to their home driver, Lance Stroll, because he will be almost certainly eliminated in probably at best 20th place. As the first car at the exit of the pit lane looks like, is it Carlos Sainz? Not quite sure. But, yeah, if it is Sainz, yeah, he's had a pretty good weekend so far. As here we go. 3, 2, 1. And qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix is underway as the cars slowly filter their way out to the track. Here's a replay of Franco Colapinto. And a bit of an unsafe release there with, I think, Lance Stroll. I think it's Stroll. And yeah, probably get a warning for that or something. But I don't think it's going to result in any penalties. As we look at the Williams of, it's actually Alex Albon, who didn't do sprint qualifying because he collided with, again, local wildlife. Hit the wall right after that on the exit of turn 7 and damaged the car badly enough that he was not able to complete, or, well, not able to complete practice 1, but not able to even compete in sprint qualifying. It is a thing here in Montreal, colliding with whatever animals decide to cross the racetrack. There was that infamous incident with Anthony Davidson where he was running up in, I think, 3rd or 4th place in that 2007 Canadian Grand Prix. That was the race where, of course, Lewis Hamilton famously took his first ever win. Yeah, Davidson was running in, I think, 4th place and collided with a beaver, was it? Broke his front wing, came into the pits, and I'm pretty sure there's a hilarious clip of it somewhere where he parks up in the pit box and the team are all sat in the carriage. Then they look out and they see his car and they're like completely baffled as to why he's there, because they had no idea he was coming in, and then they all rushed out and fixed his car. But yeah, if it wasn't for that, Anthony Davidson could have possibly had a top 4, top 5 finish that day. As Alex Albon has backed off on the lap he was on. Looks like he's just doing an extra warm-up lap. The temperatures are not super high. Definitely not as high as they were yesterday in Montreal. Air temperature is 21 degrees Celsius, which is actually quite a bit cooler than many parts of the UK, which is quite remarkable. Ted Bear, I think it is, says, this is the first time I'm watching an F1 season from the start since discovering F1, and I'm enjoying it so far. What do you think of the season so far? I'm enjoying it rather a lot more since they made the changes to the power units in between the Japanese and Miami race. But yeah, it's not been great so far, but let's wait after another few races and we'll see, see how we feel once we get, say, a couple more months down the line. As Arvid Lindblad has gone quickest. Now Fernando Alonso has gone quickest. Don't know what the lap times are, though. They might just be slow laps. As it was actually Alonso who was unsafely released into the path of Colapinto, and he will be investigated after the session, it says. As Oscar Piastri now goes quickest, but again, I don't know if that's if it's a proper lap or not. They're not actually showing the lap time, so I'm going to assume that those laps are pretty slow. Yeah, well, Piastri's on a 1:15.1, which is not slow, but it's nowhere near as quick as he'll be going later on. As here comes Oliver Bearman to the line, who goes second with a 1:15.6. Pole position in the sprint qualifying session yesterday was a 1:12.9. As Lindblad now goes second on a 1:15.3. pole position today should be a mid 1 minute 12 at best. So, in terms of this session, the best lap time I think you'll see in this session is probably a mid 113, as Max Verstappen does a mid 114 straight away, 114.6. That's a decent start from him, as Colapinto goes up to second. Lando Norris now goes quickest on a 114.2. So that's a pretty good lap there from Norris. First lap on the board. As Colapinto is up to third. Piastri in fourth. Lindblad fifth. Behrman sixth. Sainz in seventh. Then Lawson in 8th place. With Hulkenberg in 9th. Well, not anymore, because Bortoletto's gone up there. As George Russell goes second. His teammate Antonelli now replaces him in second and goes slightly slower than Norris. So Antonelli up to second with a 114.2. Here comes Lewis Hamilton. Only 6th on a 114.8. As Leclerc only 15th on that lap. That's a very poor lap. 116.3. So the top 10 is Norris, Antonelli, Russell. Then in what do you call it? In third, if I can get his name to go up the order. So Russell in, well, not third anymore, because Piastri is into second. And Antonelli third, Russell fourth. Here comes Alex Albon, who goes up to P12. So, yeah, top 10 is Norris, Piastri, Antonelli, Russell, Verstappen, Colapinto, Hamilton. Lawson now goes 8th. And then Lindblad 9th. Isaac Hadjar is 10th. But he's immediately been replaced by Carlos Sainz, who's gone 7th, and Behrman, who's gone up to 9th. As that is Pierre Gasly, who's just come into the pit lane. So Lawson now down to 10th, and then Lindblad 11th, Hadjar 12th. Esteban Ocon is up to 13th, Albon 14th, and then Bortoletto in 15th. Not anymore, because Sergio Perez goes up to 13th. What a lap. And that's just further confirmation of, how quick Cadillac genuinely are. As I'm trying to get Perez's name to move up to 13th, but he won't let me. I'll try again in a moment. As in the drop zone, it's currently Alonso, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Stroll, Gasly, and Leclerc currently last, as his lap was deleted for a track limit violation. As George Russell now goes quickest, a 113.9. As his teammate with the purple middle sector now comes to the line. And, that is a very good lap, a 113.3. That is a super lap, as Isaac Hadjar does a great lap as well and goes second. But 113.3, that is some pace from our championship leader. Already 2/10 quicker than I was expecting for this session, as that's a replay of Hulkenberg, currently 18th, locking both front tyres and going deep at turn 1. Audi not in great shape, as Bortoletto also locking up and going off at turn 4, where Vettel went lawn mowing. And yeah, that's how Leclerc cut the track limits and bumped quite hard over the sausage curb at the final chicane. I hope that didn't damage his floor, because if it did, he's in trouble. But for some reason, I can't get Sergio Perez's name to go above Ocon's. The gods just won't allow it. But Perez is ahead of Ocon currently in 13th place, but I doubt he's going to stay there. As Max Verstappen is up to 4th. Here comes Charles Leclerc, surely into Q2, and he goes up to 8th place. So Leclerc, that's 1:14.3. That should see him in. So the drop zone now: Bortoleto, Alonso, Hulkenberg, Bottas, and Stroll, and then Gasly is now last. Gasly having a real struggle. He's on an outlap, and he's still got 6.5 minutes to improve. As Lewis Hamilton on a new lap, but he's 1/4 of a second down on Antonelli after the first 2 sectors. Still, though, this will improve his lap, as Lindblad has gone up to 3rd place with a 1:13.8. That's a fantastic lap by Arvid Lindblad. As Hamilton, not a great run there through the chicane, but he comes to the line. And P5. Not a great run for Ferrari so far, but this part of qualifying is just about making sure you get into the next part of qualifying, which they are going to do without a doubt. As Charles Leclerc here completed a first sector on a new lap. Can he at least get on terms with his teammate as he wiggles about on the exit of turn 9. Now into the hairpin, turn 10. And he's got traffic ahead of him, which is his teammate, who's completely held him up there. That is awful from Ferrari. How have they got that wrong? Leclerc coming up to the hairpin, completely just ruined his lap there, did Lewis Hamilton. Not intentionally, of course. Ferrari engineers on the radio clearly fucked that up. As Lando Norris is now coming down the back straight, down to the final chicane, currently in 7th place. Surely a lot more pace in this McLaren. Very good run through the chicane. That looked great. Now he comes to the line. And yes, 2nd, only a 10.5 off. That is much more like it. Here is Pierre Gasly now. Currently last of all. But he's on a much better lap. As Alex Albon is up to 13th. Here comes Pierre Gasly, who goes up to 10th. That is much, much better. So that pushes Perez. Oh no, pushes Ocon into the drop zone. Perez is in 16th. As Liam Lawson just improved and went up to 9th place. Leclerc, though, is on another good lap, and he's done a purple first sector. What's the lap overall? Puts him up to 4th. That should be good enough now to get him into Q2. Here comes Piastri to the purple middle sector. Goes 3rd. Very close on time to his teammate. That is a Cadillac with damage to its barge board there. Don't know what that is. As Alonso has just gone ahead of Sergio Perez. Hold on a sec. So yeah, Perez is now 18th. Audi currently 19th and 21st. And Hulkenberg's just improved, but is still 17th. Where is the Audi pace? Nowhere to be seen at the minute. As Bortoleto improves, but only goes 16th. Pushes Ocon into the drop zone. As Carlos Sainz is up to P10. Behrman is up to 12th. Here comes Lewis Hamilton, who goes 5th. That's definitely him into Q2. Here's Lando Norris on another lap. Norris currently in 2nd. Can he get on terms with Antonelli? That'd be great if he could. Because Antonelli's lap was a super lap. And Norris, he does go slightly quicker, but stays on a 1:13.5. That's still a great lap time, though, from both McLarens, who look strong so far. But that lap from Antonelli was, yeah, a super lap. So, another 45 seconds to go. And in the drop zone, it's Ocon, Hulkenberg, Perez, now up to 19th. Alonso 20th. And then Stroll 21st, Bottas 22nd. As Lawson goes over the line and stays in 11th. As this is Ocon, who nearly oversteers into the wall on the exit of turn 9. But he's a 10th up on Bortoleto, which is enough for what he needs at the minute to possibly get into Q2. It's going to be close. As Alonso's giving it everything behind and doing some good sectors, but not good enough to get him into Q2. As Ocon goes through the chicane. To the line. And Ocon goes 15th. But will he stay there as Colapinto goes ahead of his teammate up to 13th? Here comes Fernando Alonso, who goes 18th. Realistically, the best he could do there. Don't know if he'll stay there, though. As Hulkenberg through the chicane. Can he drag this Audi into Q2? For the minute he can, he goes 14th. And that pushes Ocon down to 16th. Now we look at Bortoleto. Can he get himself out of the drop zone and push Ocon out of qualifying? He comes through the chicane to the line. He does by half a tenth. Gabriel Bortoleto gets into 16th place. And I don't think Alex Albon is on a lap. I hope he's not. No, he's not. He's pitted. So both Audis only just have got themselves into Q2, but that was way closer than it really should have been. As that's a replay of Bottas locking his inside front into turn 1 and going deep. Bottas ending up last of all. But there you go. That is Q1 over and done with. Let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the second part of qualifying. Antonelli, Norris, Piastri, Hadjar, Hamilton, Leclerc, Lindblad, Russell, Verstappen, Sainz, Lawson, Behrman, Colapinto, Hulkenberg, Gasly, and Bortoletto. And knocked out in Q1, Esteban Ocon, Alex Albon, Fernando Alonso, Sergio Perez, Lance Stroll, and Valtteri Bottas. And Q2 will be underway in, 2 or 3 minutes' time? And it'll be a 15-minute long session. I'll sync up the timer at the 14-minute mark. Both Astons and both Cadillacs out. No surprise there. Albon eliminated. He'll be very disappointed with that because even though he's not had as much time in the car as his teammate, Sainz obviously a lot quicker in that session, so that'll disappoint him. Ocon, I was thinking about this actually, I think yesterday with Esteban Ocon, that it feels like he is circling the drain of his Formula One career, if you know what I mean. Because this year, last year, it just doesn't feel like he's maintaining that good midfield level that he was at, that made him such an asset for the Alpine team. And obviously back in the day for Force India. And it's a shame because this time last year he had a good start with the Haas team. In the early part of 2025, but since the summer break of last year, he has just not been the same. He has not been on the same level of his teammate. And I like Behrman. I think Behrman's a good driver, quick driver, but Behrman is not the second coming of Max Verstappen or anything. So yeah, I think Ocon might be in a bit of trouble with his seat in Formula One. Put it that way. Because he is not performing at the level that he needs to if he's going to be in the sport for that much longer. Especially if, if Behrman ends up at Ferrari next season, which I know is not really that realistic, but it could happen. I doubt that Haas are going to want Ocon to lead their team when he is, clearly off the pace of Behrman. So yeah, I think Ocon's in a bit of trouble for his Formula One career. Needs to turn it round. He's been in Formula One for almost 10 years as Esteban, so he's had a good run. If this is the last year of his Formula One career, but we know what he can do. It's just a matter of him showing it. But can he do it as consistently as before anymore? Maybe he can't. Maybe he's got to that point of his career where he's just not as consistent, as he was before. But like I said, if he wants to save his Formula One career, I think he really needs to step it up in the next few races. But yeah, Q2 will be underway in the next, I think, few seconds or so. In this session, Audi, you'd expect to have both cars knocked out. They were not very quick in their Q1. As well, Alpine didn't really look that quick, so I think they might be at risk, those two teams, of elimination. Racing Bulls looked quick, and Carlos Sainz looked quick, pretty much like yesterday, so it's all playing out similar to yesterday in terms of the performance in the midfield. As we see there, Max Verstappen in his garage. And Q2 officially has begun, but I'll sync up the timer in about 45 seconds time. The best time in Q1 was a 1:13.3. That was a super lap time from Antonelli. I can see if Mercedes do end up quickest in this session, I think they'll probably be dipping into the 1-minute 12s. So the best time in this session probably will be a 1:12.8 or a 1:12.9, which is pretty much what pole position was in the sprint qualifying yesterday. If you want to get into Q3 though, you're going to need to do probably a 1-minute 13.8 or better to absolutely make sure. I think you might be able to get away with a 1:13.9, 1:14.0. Might be able to get away with that, but yeah, if you're like a 1:14.2 or slower, I don't think there's any chance you'll be getting into Q3. As we're looking here at the McLaren on its warm-up lap. And it's Lando Norris who, after the last Grand Prix in Miami, it does feel like he's turned a corner this season. He was pretty good in Miami. He won the sprint in Miami. Had a really good race where he could have won that race if it wasn't for a slightly slow pit stop. It was a very good performance from Lando. But he's carried over that good form, that good pace into this event. And yeah, he's looking good. As Lewis Hamilton, we now see warming his tyres up. Last couple races for him have not been great. But he's been much better this weekend and hopefully keeps it up. But looks like all the drivers are doing an extra warm-up lap because of the cooler temperatures. As we're looking at George Russell, who his only pole position this season was in Melbourne. Which, if you told me by this point of the season that his only pole of the season would have been in Melbourne, I would have been very, very surprised. As we look at Lando Norris, who, yeah, he's doing the extra warm-up lap. He's coming towards the end, though, of that extra warm-up lap. As Colapinto goes quickest. I don't know if that's a proper lap, though, but I'll put him up there anyway. As, yeah, Lando Norris starts his first run. So let's see what the pace is like for these front runners. Like I said, fastest lap time of Q2 should be a late 1-minute 12, which is pretty much what the pole position time was in sprint qualifying yesterday. As Lando does a first sector, which is not great in lap time, a 20.9. Looked a bit better there through turn 8 and 9 as he approaches now turn 10. And a decent exit from that corner as Lewis Hamilton immediately 2/10 up on what Norris did in the first sector. The Ferrari has been so quick in the first sector all weekend as Hadjar is currently quickest on a 1:13.6, which is not a bad first lap. Here comes Lando Norris, who does a 1:13.2. That's a good first run there in Q2. Here comes teammate Piastri, who goes second on a 1:13.4. as Pierre Gasly is 5th, slower than teammate Colapinto. As Lewis Hamilton has done a purple first sector. Is it a good enough lap overall to get him into P1? No, it is not. He is 300ths off. So Hamilton into 2nd. Still a good lap, though, as here comes his teammate Leclerc. To the line. Yeah, not a great lap. Not a great lap at all. 1:14.3. As I think that's Max Verstappen starting a proper run. So yeah, Leclerc only up in 6th place, as you've got Bortoleto now in 7th. Behrman in 8th. Well, not anymore, because you've got now George Russell in 4th, as Antonelli goes quickest at a 1:13.0. That is a strong first lap of Q2. Antonelli looking very good so far in qualifying. Can he keep it up for Q3? But yeah, Russell is now 5th. Then it's Hadjar, Hulkenberg up in P7. Then Colapinto, Leclerc, Bortoleto. Then the drop zone, got Behrman, Gasly. Then the rest of the drivers haven't done a proper lap. Now Sainz has and goes up into P10. Max Verstappen, though, is about to dump him out of the top 10, as here he comes up to the line and goes 5th. 4/10 off. That's not too bad. Not obviously where they want to be, but not too bad, as Isaac Hadjar goes 0.3 of a second quicker. Up to 2nd. With a 1:13.2, I think it is. Yeah. So, clearly there is, at the minute, quite a bit of performance there for Red Bull, as Norris now replaces Hadjar in 2nd. Leclerc now coming through the middle sector, up to the middle sector point. What's his sector time? It's good. It's 4.5 up on Colapinto. Not a great run, though, through the hairpin. Leclerc just hasn't had a good weekend at all. He's never looked comfortable in this Ferrari car. He's been clearly second best to Hamilton. As into the final chicane he comes. Decent run. What's the lap time? 1:13.8. That's still not a good lap time. I mean, it probably is good enough to get him into Q3, but he's what? Half a second, over half a second slower than his teammate. That is very poor. As this is a replay of Behrman going deep at turn 8, where Russell and Antonelli had a further incident in the sprint earlier, where Antonelli went for a dive bomb and went off the track. As Arvid Lindblad, what a lap he's done, up to 7th place with a 1:13.5. That's him, I'm pretty sure, into Q3. I think that's already a good enough lap. So congratulations to Lindblad on another Q3 appearance. And then you've got what? Russell 8th, Leclerc 9th, and then Hulkenberg in P10. Russell, another driver that needs to improve, as that's a replay of Lawson locking both front tyres into the final chicane and going to the escape road. You probably could have made the chicane, but it would have been close as to whether he hit the wall or not on the exit, and obviously didn't want to risk that. So in the drop zone, it is Colapinto, Sainz, Bortoleto, Behrman, Gasly, Lawson. Lawson, though, hasn't done a proper lap time. So we'll see who can get out. I mean, the Alpine team, I think, have got a good chance of getting a car in. Bit surprised Hulkenberg is in the top 10 at the minute, given how poor they looked in Q1. But the most impressive lap times in this session, without a doubt, Hadjar and Lindblad. As Leclerc back in the Ferrari garage. I do wonder with Leclerc whether he's got damage from that incident earlier in qualifying where he went over the sausage curb. Maybe that explains his lap time loss. And if it does, then, well, that's all his fault. As here is Liam Lawson, currently 16th. Lawson really should get his car into the top 10 here, given his teammate is comfortably in and looks like he's comfortably on his way to Q3. As that's a good run there for Lawson through turn 8 and 9. But not a good middle sector. Can he claw back something in the final sector? Lawson still in the top 10 of the championship after the first couple races he had where he scored a lot of points. Here comes Lawson, though. To the line. Only 13th. That's poor. Very poor. That's, I think, 8/10 slower than his teammate. As that's a replay of Russell locking up, going into turn 1 and going deep and giving up on the lap. Russell, though, needs to still do another lap to make sure he gets into Q3. Also, Russell does need another lap, really, just for his confidence. Because Antonelli has been absolutely perfect so far. As Pierre Gasly, what can he do? Can he get this Alpine, which has performed strongly this season, into the top 10? No. Only 15th as Colapinto, his teammate, does get into the top 10. What's happened? Colapinto all of a sudden has become a very fast driver ever since that last Grand Prix in Miami. He's finally stepped it up. As is a replay of Behrman locking the inside front into the final chicane and going to the escape road to avoid any possible contact with the wall. And here is George Russell. Russell will make it into Q3 with the lap he's done, even though he's in 8th place. But he needs an improved lap here, really, just for his confidence, because this fight for pole is, well, crucial. As Lewis Hamilton does a very good first sector and is a 10th.5 up on Antonelli in the middle sector. This is a super lap from Lewis Hamilton, who has had pole position here so many times. Well over 5 times he's had pole position here. I can't even remember how many times he's had pole here. It's been that many. As Hamilton does just about go quickest, a 1:13.0. Great lap from the 7 times champion. As George Russell, what is this lap like for him? He goes 3rd, just behind his teammate, so that's at least much better. But still behind Antonelli, despite Antonelli having done his lap much earlier. Verstappen completes a lap but stays in 7th. Here's Lawson, who goes 11th but is out of qualifying. That is the best he could do, as Isaac Hadjar goes quickest. A 1:12.9. Hadjar is absolutely on it today. Hulkenberg goes 11th. He's out in Q2. Hadjar, we've seen this with him. When he is on it in qualifying, he is an absolute speed demon. As Behrman finishes up in 14th for now. Sainz ends up in 13th. Bortoletto finishes only 13th. So 11th and 13th it looks like for Audi at the minute. As here is Charles Leclerc through the final chicane. Can he make sure of his place in Q3? Yes, he does. Goes up to 8th. So the only man who can get himself out the drop zone now is Pierre Gasly. As the checkered flag has fallen. What has Gasly done? A terrible lap. Only 14th, over 3/10 slower than Colapinto. And Gasly is out. And Colapinto, for the second race in a row, is into Q3. But look at that. Fastest driver in Q2, Isaac Hadjar, 112.9. Is Hadjar a contender for pole? Is Max Verstappen a contender for pole if he's got much more potential in the car? Who knows? Honestly, who knows? But let's go through your drivers that have made it in to the top 10 shootout. Isaac Hadjar, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, Kimi Antonelli, George Russell, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Arvid Lindblad, and Franco Colapinto. But knocked out in Q2, Nico Hulkenberg, Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoletto, Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, and Oliver Behrman. And Q3 is now what we wait for, which will be underway in about 5 minutes' time. I'll sync up the timer at the 12-minute mark. But yeah, that lap time from Hadjar really is baffling to me. Because normally, if anyone's going to be doing strong times in the Red Bull, you'd expect it to be Max Verstappen. But Hadjar was, half a second quicker. So have Red Bull suddenly found loads of pace and will Max be able to deliver it in Q3? Or is Hadjar suddenly, quicker than Max this weekend? What is going on? We'll find out, obviously, in Q3. But yeah, that is a baffling lap in a good way. But Hamilton looking good. Norris looking good. Ultimately, though, the favourite for pole is Antonelli. He, even though he didn't end up quickest in that session, he didn't do a second run. If he did, I'm sure he would have ended up quickest. So, yeah, Antonelli, if he keeps it together, I'm sure he gets pole here. And let me finish up the poll results, as you guys have clearly voted for your winner. 190 votes. Thank you all for voting. And I asked you guys who will take pole position in Canada today, and 48% of that vote has gone to Kimi Antonelli, 28% for Russell, and 12% each for Hamilton and Leclerc. And yeah, if Antonelli doesn't get pole here, then I would be very surprised. But let me just read through some comments before we get into Q3. As Leclerc saying on the radio, I'm completely off the pace. Q3 is either in the wall or P8. We just need to make sure. Give me clean air. I don't care about whatever else. Just clean air. That's all that matters. So it's not down to any damage. He just doesn't have any confidence or pace, which is not good enough. It's just not good enough. Lewis Hamilton is Lewis Hamilton. We have to accept that. But even though Lewis is having a great weekend, it's not like Lewis is doing stuff that he was doing 5 or 6 years ago. So, being behind Hamilton is not a crime, but he should at least be close behind, a tenth or so. He was, half a second or more behind Lewis in that session. So, yeah, Leclerc is having an absolute stinker. And that is not good enough if, he wants to keep himself in a good position in the championship to maybe fight for it later on if Ferrari do find some improvements, especially with the power unit. And that's one criticism with Leclerc is he isn't like, say, Max Verstappen, where he is on it every weekend. Most weekends he is, but he has his weekends where he just never really gets on the proper pace that he should be on. As they're just showing an onboard shot of Isaac Hadjar's lap that put him quickest. And yeah, can he keep up that performance and confidence into Q3? But surely, if you're Max Verstappen and you're seeing your teammate do that, surely that's got to give you confidence. Because if Isaac Hadjar could do a 112.9 in Q2, then surely Max can get up there. But who knows? Maybe Mercedes have been sandbagging all along, which is most probable. But anyway, enough of the talk. Now we get to find out who has what. As Q3 is underway. As the cars slowly filter out onto the circuit. 2 McLarens, now the 2 Ferraris. And Lewis Hamilton, by the way, if you're wondering. Yeah, he has had pole position here. Again, so many times I can't even remember straight away. But yeah, 2007 he had pole. 2008, 2010, 2012, 2015, 2016, 2017. So, and yeah, his last pole here was in 2017, 9 years ago. That was when he broke Ayrton's. Was it? Did he equal or break Ayrton Senna's pole number of pole positions? I can't remember exactly, but it was that weekend where he got gifted Senna's helmet. That was the last time he took pole position here in Montreal 9 years ago. And yeah, he's had pole position here in Montreal, I believe, 7 times. One of his best circuits by far. As we look at Max Verstappen on a secondary warm-up lap. Max was complaining about tyre warm-up problems in Q1, so I'm wondering if that's what he's suffering with. He just can't get the tyres up to temperature. Maybe Hadjar can, for whatever reason. As we're looking at here, Charles Leclerc, who will also be continuing to do another warm-up lap. And yeah, Leclerc, he needs to just at least try and get the car on the 3rd row of the grid. At least that would put him in some sort of position to fight tomorrow. As here is Kimi Antonelli. Is he starting a lap or is he going to do another warm-up lap? Looks like he's going to do another warm-up lap because they're not bothering to show him. But out of the entire top 10, the only drivers that have took pole position here before are Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and Max Verstappen. Of course, Hamilton has took pole here, like I said, 7 times previously. So that experience might be key in this session, as Verstappen has started his first attempt at who knows. Could be pole, could be 7th place. As he completes the first sector, 20.6. That's a strong first sector. And it's quicker than Hadjar by a few hundredths of a second. Into turn 8 comes the 4 times world champion. The man who graced the Nordschleife with his presence a week ago. Now gracing another famous circuit. And can he deliver another pole position in Canada? Oscar Piastri has just done a purple middle sector quicker than Verstappen. As Verstappen through the final chicane. What's the lap time looking like? It is a 1 minute 13.4, which is disappointing to say the least. That's half a second slower than Hadjar did in Q2, and Hadjar does a 1:13.9. Goes a second slower than he did in Q2. As Piastri goes quickest, a 1:13.0. Lando Norris, a 1:12.7. What a lap by Norris, but is it good enough? I'm not sure it will be. Here's Lewis Hamilton, who goes second, a 10th.5 down on Norris. Charles Leclerc, what can he do? To the line, only 4th. He at least gets himself ahead of the 2 Red Bulls. And I very quickly need to turn my TV off and back on again, as a shutdown message came up at the exact wrong time. So let's see what the times are when I come back. And George Russell pits, so clearly not happy with that lap. And Kimi Antonelli goes 4th. So Mercedes not delivering on those first laps. And here's what happened for Russell. Went into turn 6 and looked like the rear end locked up on downshift. Yeah, Russell saying nothing on the rear. And it looked like it. No grip there as he tried to downshift. But yeah, Antonelli only doing a 1:13.0. Lando Norris on pole position for the moment on a 1:12.7. And it is currently Norris on provisional pole from Hamilton 2nd, Piastri 3rd, Antonelli 4th, Leclerc 5th, Verstappen 6th, Lindblad 7th, Colapinto 8th, Hadjar 9th, and Russell has not done a proper lap time, and he is in P10. So, wow. That is a surprising start to Q3. McLaren have delivered big time so far. So have Ferrari with Hamilton. But Mercedes and Red Bull have really failed to find the pace. Mercedes are lapping at the same pace they were in Q2. Red Bull are lapping miles off the pace they were doing in Q2 when they topped the session. If Hadjar had done his 1:12.9 in that first run, Hadjar would currently be up in 3rd place. Meanwhile, he's currently 9th. So Red Bull and Mercedes have much more lap time to find, as George Russell is straight back out there on a outlap. As all the other cars remain in the pits. I've got to say, for Mercedes, really does feel like they need pole here. If they don't get pole here, I don't think they've got a great chance at winning, given what we saw in the sprint with their race pace. But there is still time to salvage the situation as Russell starts his first proper run, which he hopes will count. As we're now looking at Colapinto for some reason. I'd rather look at George Russell, but there you go. Shout out, by the way, Arvid Lindblad, currently up in 7th place. Who knows, maybe he'll end up on the 4th row of the grid. Given his pace in this weekend, he should end up at least in 9th. As the top 7, including Hadjar in 9th, all come out of the pits for their out laps. Of course, they're going to do 2 warm-up laps. Russell on the end of his 2nd warm-up lap. He's took pole here in the last 2 years. Can he take pole right now to turn around his championship fortunes? Here we go. As Russell through turn 1, 2, and 3 looks good. Now turn 4. And he's only by half a tenth slower than Norris, so it's not a bad start for Russell as he builds speed up to turn 8 and gets through turn 8 and 9 pretty well. What's the middle sector looking like? He's a tenth and a half down. This is not going to plan for Mr. Saturday. And if he doesn't get even in the top 2, he could end up with a pretty low grid position here. As, not a great run through the final chicane. He went deep, slightly too deep at the first part. And that compromised his run through the second part. And he only goes 3rd. And if the others improve, I think Russell is in big trouble as Max Verstappen has just completed a lap and remained in 7th place. But there is still 2 minutes and 10 seconds to go. So I think Max might still have another run in him. And possibly George Russell might have another run in. We'll see. But here comes the championship leader, Kimi Antonelli. Can he deliver pole position for the Silver Arrows? Into turn 1 and 2 he comes. Looks very good through there. Now through 3 and 4, and yeah, this looks good. Flat through 5. Purple first sector. Nearly a tenth quicker than Norris. And you can just tell visually by looking at this lap that this is a good lap. This is going to be either on pole or close to it. As Leclerc does a good first sector. Antonelli up to the middle sector. He's a couple hundredths down on Norris. It's all going to come down to the final sector where Mercedes have been the quickest normally in the final sector. Will the Mercedes power and the drag setup carry him to pole? Through the chicane he comes. Looks good. Does Antonelli go on to pole? Yes, he does by 0.08 of a second. Kimi Antonelli does a 1:12.6 and he's on provisional pole for now as Piastri does a purple middle sector. Leclerc goes 4th ahead of Russell, who's currently down in 5th. As this is Lando Norris to the line. stays in second. He actually went slower than his previous best lap time. Here's his teammate Piastri. He goes third. Only a few hundredths slower than his teammates. So second and third for McLaren. Here comes Isaac Hadjar, who's literally willing his car to the line. But he goes fifth as Russell is on a new lap. And he's done a powerful middle sector. He comes through the final chicane. Can he take pole for the third year in a row? Yes, he does by 7 hundredths of a second. George Russell is on pole. Max Verstappen only goes 6th. And Mercedes have took the front row of the grid. And Russell, I think, has ended up the exact same gap ahead of Antonelli that he did yesterday. 0.068 of a second. George Russell, for the third year in a row, is on pole in Montreal. And that might just be a turning point in his season. As this is a replay of Lewis Hamilton, who ended up in 5th. The top 5, by the way, finishing up exactly like it did in sprint qualifying. As Hamilton made a poor mistake on the exit of turn 7, sliding the rear end, and he touched the grass. That would have cost him a couple tenths. That's poor. So let's go through your top 10. George Russell on pole, Antonelli second, Norris third, McLaren getting third and fourth, Piastri in fourth. McLaren will be very happy with that. Only a tenth and a half they were in the end away from pole. McLaren are here to play. Lewis Hamilton 5th, Verstappen 6th, Hadjar 7th, Leclerc 8th, poor session from Leclerc, Lindblad in 9th, Colapinto 10th, and the rest of your field, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Bortoletto, Gasly, Sainz, Behrman, Ocon, Albon, Alonso, Perez, Stroll, and Bottas. But it is George Russell who has got the job done. Congratulations to him. There you go. There he is. Third year in a row on pole in Montreal. This is his track when it comes to qualifying in Canada. And if he can win tomorrow, then his championship challenge can properly get going in 2026. But let's see who you guys think was the driver of the day. Let me just quickly start up that poll in the chat. Who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Canada? And George Russell has got to be, obviously, an option. Lando Norris deserves a big shout out. As well, I'm going to put Oscar Piastri in there. I think both McLaren drivers were brilliant. And McLaren, they are not to be doubted. And the fourth option will be Arvid Lindblad. So let me know who you think driver of the day is. For me, driver of the day, I think I'd go Lando Norris. 10th and a half only away from pole. I don't think he could have done more than that. Great job by Russell to deliver at the end there, but yeah, Lando Norris and both him and Piastri, super laps. But I'd say Lando Norris. I think his entire Q3 performance was brilliant. To push Mercedes as hard as he and they did as a team. Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what McLaren could maybe do tomorrow. I thought they'd have a decent weekend here, but they are proving to be even quicker here than I expected. Someone, though, just said in the chat, and it is true, I'm afraid. Yeah, Looney Classics has said it. Lewis fumbled again, yeah. I think he could have got a really good result there. Let me just look at the data. And yeah, Hamilton that mistake, I think, cost him third on the grid, because if he lost probably a couple tenths from that error, if you take off a couple tenths of lap time from his final lap time, he would have ended up third and only a couple hundredths behind Antonelli. So third was definitely on the table, but Hamilton, he even shook his head. He knows that was poor. Kid Latin saying another Mercedes-Benz 1-2 tomorrow. Maybe, but I don't think it's going to be quite as simple as that, because we could have rain, which is forecast. And even in the dry, I don't think it's necessarily a slam dunk. I mean, we saw what happened in the sprint between Russell and Antonelli. We could have some real fireworks tomorrow. Make sure to join me and my co-commentator for tomorrow, Niblo, on stream, because I think tomorrow we're going to have a very exciting Canadian Grand Prix. And yeah, just a reminder, I'll be live 2 hours before lights out at 7 p.m. UK time for the usual build up to the race, and then the watch along itself. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I think we're in for a good, exciting race, dry or wet. And thankfully, all of the top 8 looks pretty close and competitive. So I think we'll see plenty of moments, hard racing, all of that. But let me just have a look at a couple of your comments before we go on to the poll results, which I'll let you guys vote on that. Yeah, Rook saying Leclerc shocking. Yeah. Ferrari, it really feels like since Miami, they're just not delivering the potential that is clearly there in that car. I mean, there is still a race tomorrow. Again, if it's wet, maybe that benefits them, and maybe they'll pull it back tomorrow, but you can't sit there and say that they've done the best they could have done today. No way. 5th and 8th on the grid is nowhere near good enough. They should be, at worst, having a car on the second row of the grid. And yeah, 5th and 8th is obviously not that. So much to do tomorrow. Someone might saying, damn it, Russell. G Walker saying Lando will push hard tomorrow. I think both McLaren drivers, I think, are in a great position, because even if they're slower than Mercedes, which, you know, is possible, if the two Mercedes drivers battle and have incidents with each other, then all the McLaren drivers have got to do is just sit there and wait for it to all unfold and take advantage. Kind of similar to that race, that time in, I know this is a long time ago, but back in Turkey, 2010, all those years ago, where the two Red Bulls had their squabble, had contact, and the two McLarens just swept on through and took the advantage and ended up with a 1-2. We could, you know, that could easily happen tomorrow. So as long as the McLaren drivers just, you know, sit there, keep it together, look after their tyres, keep the Mercedes team under pressure, then yeah, there's no reason why they can't benefit from any squabbles. Ewok asking, you thought about doing an F1 podcast show with Nib? We used to a few years ago, but I think me and him, we just don't have the time to do it. Because he has work. Obviously, I've got whatever, my uni stuff and all of that. Obviously, I do my podcast, the day after a race, but at least I know I can do that because I make sure to get that all recorded and done, pretty much at the same time after a Grand Prix. But yeah, it's just it was way easier a few years ago to be able to record those and make those because we had more free time basically. So yeah, it's just not uh not quite as possible these days. Um, G Walker, thanks, mate. Have a good one. Let me see if there's any other comments I can find. And yeah, G Walker's going to see you at the start tomorrow. Good. Good to be good to have you along again. Obviously one of the regulars. And Rook's posting a quote from Russell after qualifying there saying, tomorrow looks to be wet, which is a whole new challenge. Of course, 2 years ago when it was wet, Russell started on pole for that race and it ended up all falling apart. Russell ended up, was it third? I think he ended up. And yeah, it just never went to plan, that race. But yeah, looking at the forecast, the race starts at 4 p.m. local time. So, looking at the forecast, it looks like there's more chance we're going to have rain before the race than it does during. So, I think what is likely is we're going to have a lot of rain pre-race, and then if it is wet for the start, then it'll be wet. But I think it probably dries out in the first half of the race. So I think we could easily see half, if not most, of the race in dry conditions. But looking at the weather radar, it doesn't look like a guarantee. It's honestly, there was more chance of rain in Miami looking at the radar than there is for tomorrow's race, but who knows? I don't know what to believe anymore after the last Grand Prix. But I think I'll finish up the poll results. About 20 odd votes. And let me just wait for it to appear in the chat. Which it will in a moment. And there you go. 19 votes. I asked you guys who's your driver today for qualifying in Canada, and 41% of the vote goes for the pole position man, George Russell. Lando Norris, 32% of the vote. Lindblad, 16% of Piastri, 11%. Thank you guys for voting. And yeah, thank you guys for coming along for this qualifying stream. Be great, obviously, to be back live on the channel. And we will be back live tomorrow for the main event, which is the race, the Canadian Grand Prix race day. As I've said before, I'll be live at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before lights out for the build-up for the race, and then the race starts at 9 p.m. UK time. So make sure to join us for all that, and to join us for what I think will be a pretty exciting Grand Prix in Montreal. Normally is one of the better races of a Formula One season, and I think it'll probably be so tomorrow. So yeah, make sure to be there. Before you go, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Make sure to smash a like button before you go as well. And thank you very much for coming along to this stream. For considering that I haven't been able to upload or do any content in the last few weeks. It's been great to have a good amount of you along for this stream. But guys, until tomorrow's main event, the 2026 Canadian Grand Prix, which could very well be a wet Canadian Grand Prix. Until then, guys, it has been me, Kazza HD. Goodbye.